Alright, this is the Compaq Deskpro EN's old power supply. You might remember that one of the Molex connections, the electrical connections to the Molex connector, became loose and pretty much useless because it wasn't keeping a steady connection to the hard drive. So I replaced it with the power supply that's in it now that I got from school. There's a ton of those power supplies lying around. And by the way, that power supply is starting to exhibit the same thing, so I'm going to have to do a redneck fix and splice a new Molex connector on it. But anyhow, you might remember I said that I was going to turn this into a cool project. Well, I am, and I'm going to turn it into a lab power supply. And by the way, this is a Compaq PDP-115. These are beautiful power supplies. Very beautiful power supplies. First of all, I think they're well built power supplies. They are small, they're only 120 watts, but I have full faith that they can handle 120 watts. I think they're very well built power supplies. They're electronically protected, so if something shorts out or if there's too much current draw, then the thing will just shut right down for about a second and then it'll start back up. As a matter of fact, I've already been testing this thing out with various 12-volt appliances, and one of my marine radios, a very old marine radio from the 70s or 80s, I turn it on and it trips the protection on this. Just turning it on, it trips the protection, and then when it comes back on, it runs normally. That's how sensitive the protection is, which I think is really great, because, you know, there's just going to be that much safety in case something bad happens. Another thing is, these are thermally controlled. I didn't know this, but it's true. You do not need, the computer does not control the fan speed of these power supplies. They do it themselves. So when this thing is running, you know, with just a normal, you know, a small load on it, the fan spins slowly and it's nice and quiet. But if you increase the load and things start getting warm, it'll actually speed up the fan all by itself. It's all standalone. By itself, this power supply can regulate the fan speed. And I've never heard of a power supply that can do that. Maybe they all can do that, but I always thought the computer controlled that. But no, the fan's automatic all by itself. And I think that's pretty awesome. So I cut the Molex connectors off it. I'll probably cut this floppy connector off too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what else I've learned about these power supplies and what I plan on doing with this one to turn it into one cool redneck project. Alright, so here I'm on a website that lists the pinout for this particular power supply. If it's not obvious, if you get a good look there, you'll see that it's not a standard ATX connector. Of course, this power supply is about as proprietary as a power supply can get. Proprietary motherboard connector, proprietary working, proprietary pinout. So it's really good to have this information on hand, and I'll put a link to this in the video description, this website. But basically what you have here, this power supply is capable of plus 3.3 volts. The negative 12 volts is just a signaling thing. I don't know what exactly it signals for, but it's useless for powering anything. So we've got fan off, which when you short fan off to ground, it actually forces the fan to turn completely off. It stops spinning. No matter how warm the power supply gets, the fan will just stay off, which I think that's pretty darn cool. Then you have a wire for power and another wire beside it for plus 5 volt auxiliary, which is another signaling wire. It doesn't provide any useful power, but when you short pins 4 and 5 together, these two wires, it turns the power supply on. So of course that's good to know. And then pin number 6 here is a wire called fan command, and what happens is when you short that to another signaling wire, I forget what wire that is, but I'll show it later. When you short fan command to a particular signal wire, the fan goes full blast. It just immediately goes full blast, and it keeps it there until you let it go. So it's very cool that you can control the fan like this. You can make it turn completely off, you can let it run full blast, or you can just let the power supply regulate it, We have plus 12 volts for power, another plus 3.3 volts, whoops, another plus 3.3 volts for power. We have a plus 3 volt auxiliary. We have ground, plus 5 volt for power, ground, another plus 5 volt for power, and another ground. So let's take a look here. So the brown wires are your plus 3.3 volts for power. I don't know what the current limit is. Let's see. 11 amps, so you certainly got a lot of current capacity there on the 3.3 volt end. And then this blue wire, that's your negative 12 volt signal, which I haven't found a use for yet, unless it's the wire that I short the fan command to make the fan go full blast. Your purple wire beside it, that is your fan off, and right across from it is a black wire for ground. So I have a little paperclip piece there shorting the fan off and the ground so the fan stays off. Then you have your white wire, which I've snipped off, and your green wire, which I've snipped off. Those are on, and your 5 volt auxiliary. These are them right here, so when you short these, the power supply turns on. And I didn't mean to snip this wire. I thought it was the on wire, but it's not. But this wire, which is white on one side and red on the other, that's your fan command, and you short that to one of the signaling wires. We'll find that out later. Then you have orange, there's your 12 volt. You have another brown, plus 3.3 volt. Pink wire, which is a 3 volt signaling. Ground, red wire for plus 5 volt power. Another ground, another red wire, which is plus 5 volt power, and another ground. So pretty much everything here is pretty straightforward, except the minus 12 volt signal and the plus 3 volt signal. So we'll figure that out in this video if they're useful for anything. But now let's plug this thing in. We're going to go to the floor, of course. I'm not doing that up here. We'll plug this thing in and measure our voltages with the multimeter and see what we can do. Okay, so I have the power supply plugged in. The fan is not spinning. And what I'll do is I'll just touch these wires together to turn it on. And the fan starts spinning, and you probably can't see it on camera, but it's spinning up and down and up and down. Another feature of this power supply is if there's no load on it, which there isn't right now, if there's no load on it, it will just turn on and off. Because it turns on to check if there's a load, and there's no load, so it goes, well, okay, I'll turn back off and wait a second for in case I need to turn off to reset the load, say. So it's just turning on and off over and over, which it'll continue to do until I place a load on it. Alright, so for our dummy load, I just have my vacuum fluorescent display, the filament hooked up to the 5 volt side. So we'll turn the power supply on, and you'll see the filament, and something is shorting out. See, it's turning off and on because those two wires are shorting out. Let's separate those. Whoops. See, it's good to have something so sensitive to short outs, or else I'd be dead. Let's turn on now. And see, the display filament is lit up now, and the fan is running at a constant speed. Alright, so now the power supply is on and running. Those filaments are drawing probably 200 or 300 milliamps of current at 5 volts. Now if we take our redneck fan switch here and place that in between fan off and a ground, and make it so it has a good connection. There we go. You can see the fan turns off, but the display keeps running, which is kind of cool. Cool until you say run the thing so hot from a high load without the fan that it burns up. Maybe this has some sort of thermal protection too, I don't know. But power supply's on, the fan's off. We pull out the paper clip and the fan starts running again. Now, once I figure out what wires they are to short out, I'll demonstrate the fan command to make the fan run at full speed. Alright, kind of ironic, but you actually short fan command to fan off, and that makes the fan run at full speed. So let me plug it in here. And it runs what would sound to me like about 75% of the speed. And we pull out the wire, and it goes back down to its normal low speed, or low if it doesn't actually need to speed the fan up because it's warm. So yeah, so there's your fan command. So really, unless someone else can think of something for me here, I can't see any reason why you would need the blue 12-volt signal or the pink 3-volt signal, because they don't put off enough current for anything, not even for an LED. The current capacity is like 0.5 milliamp or something. But there's that. So now I'll show you what I plan to do with this thing to actually turn it into a lab power supply. So here's what my multimeter reads, and these voltages actually don't seem right to me, because I remember measuring them once before and they seemed lower than they should be, but now it seems higher. So I don't know if it depends on the load or what, but on the 12-volt side we get almost 17 volts, about 16 2/3 volts. And then on the 5-volt side we get about 7 volts. And then on the 3.3 volt side we get about 4.7 volts. On the negative 12 volt side we get about negative 15 volts almost. Then on the 3 volt signal we get about 4.5 volts. Now if I put it on the current measurement here, set it to the 20 milliamp capacity mode, oops, it actually shorts out the power supply. So you can't measure the current capacity of the negative 12 volt side because it actually shorts out, but I think you can for the 3 volt signal. Well, it's more than 20 milliamps. Put it to the 200 milliamp mode. Wow, it's more than 200 milliamps. Okay. Put it to the 10 amp mode. Maybe the plus 3 volt actually has some use. Well, it says 100 milliamps. I don't know why it did the overload on the 200 milliamp setting, but according to the 10 amp setting, the plus 3 volt signal wire actually has about 100 milliamp capacity, which is enough for an LED. Cool, I didn't know that. So that probably could be useful for setting up a power light or something on this. Simply because I was so eager to find out, the filament for this vacuum fluorescent display indeed draws almost 300 milliamps at 5 volts. Now we go on to the fun part, the modifications I'm going to make to this thing. Well, to start with, I'm going to add a power switch. So for something like $2.30 at Walmart, I got this 3M lighted 12 volt power switch. It's got a incandescent light in there, a 12 volt light, and it lights up when you turn it on. And you can configure it so, I think you can configure it so it stays lit up all the time. But I'm going to have it set up so that it lights up when you turn it on and goes out when you turn it off. So it took some playing around. I've never tried to set up a lit switch before, so it took some playing around to figure out how to get it to work. But basically how it's going to work is, whoops, don't fall off the bed. So these are the two wires you short out to turn the power supply on, and they will hook up to the two posts at the end here. One of these wires will go on this post at the end, and the other wire will go on this post at the end. And then one of the orange wires, one of the 12 volt wires, will go on the center post. They'll go on the center post just like that, and that'll make it so it lights up when you turn it on. So that's pretty straightforward. What's not straightforward is where I'm going to put this switch and how I'm going to put it in there. It shouldn't be a problem to find an empty place inside this power supply somewhere where I can stick this switch through. But the thing is, I do not have the proper tools to make a square hole so I can put this in. Now, this switch can go in one of two ways. It can go in just as is, and these spring clips here keep it in place, or 3M ships it with this little thing here. You put the switch in like this and push it in, and it snaps in there, and now you've got a bezel to put it in, and you can screw it in there. So what I'm thinking of doing is having the switch in this bezel, and that way I can cut a hole the size of the actual switch itself, but I can be just as rough as I need to be. Since I don't have the proper tools, it's not going to be a proper nice neat hole. It's going to be kind of rough, but by having this bezel, I can cover up the roughness of the hole, and I can screw it in, and then it'll be all fine and dandy. Although I don't know how you actually screw it in, because there's screw holes there, but I don't see them on the other side. I see indents. Maybe you screw right through the bezel. I don't know. But yeah, so I'll cut a hole the size of the switch, and that way the switch can go through, and then the bezel will cover it. So that's about that, and I suppose I'll demonstrate the switch to you. Okay, so I had the switch figured out completely wrong. I should be ashamed to call myself an electronics hobbyist when I can't even figure out a stupid switch, but anyhow, the white and green wires, it does matter where they go. The green wire has to be on the gold contact on the end, on the same side as the on position of the switch. The white wire has to be in the center post, and then your plus 12 volts for the light has to be on the end post on the opposite end where the switch is in the off position. So we turn it on, the light comes on, and the power supply turns on. And there's our dummy load, which I still have hooked up because the light in the switch itself actually does not pull enough current to keep the power supply running. Now, if I remove my dummy load here and turn it on, see, it just flashes because the power supply is turning on and off because there isn't enough of a load to keep it on. And I think this is actually a pretty cool effect, because let's say you don't have a load hooked up, or don't have a load hooked up correctly. When you go to turn it on, this light will flash, and that'll tell you that your load isn't hooked up correctly, it ain't running. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. You know, if you don't have a load hooked up, or if something's wrong and it's not pulling any current, your power light will flash. When it's, oop, gosh, these wires keep shorting out. So you gotta be careful of. I really gotta get my next modification soon. The next modification is gonna be some binding posts. I'm going to buy a set of binding posts on eBay, much like these posts here from China. And what I'll do is I'll have a post for each voltage. I'll hook all the 12 volt wires to a post, all the 5 volt wires to a post, all the 3.3 volt wires to the post, and all the ground wires. And maybe I'll have a post for that that low current plus 3 volt auxiliary signal wire. And that'll keep all the wires from friggin' coming in contact and shorting out like they did over and over just a few seconds ago. And I don't think there's enough room in the power supply to actually install them, but I do believe that the posts are made so they can't really be shorted out. Well, if the ends there touch each other, they'd short out. But I also bought some shrink tubing, which I believe I mentioned in a very much earlier video. I bought some shrink tubing, so what I can do is I can shrink tube the wires to the ends there, and that way if the ends come in contact, you know, the shrink tubing's an insulator, they won't short out. Finally, I'd get a 3-way rocker switch like this one, and that would be to control the fan. So let's say I had it set up so your fan off was in the center, fan command was on one of the end posts, and then ground was on the other end post. I'd have it set so that when the switch was all the way in one position, say all the way pressed in this way, the fan would be off. When the switch was in the center, the fan would be automatic, and then when it's like shown here, the fan would run at full speed, so I would have full control over the fan. And I'd probably be able to find a place to install this switch in the power supply. So that's pretty much all the modifications that I can think of that I'd want to do to turn this into a lab power supply. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how to rig up a Compaq PDP-115 power supply found in the small form factor Compaq Deskpro EN, perhaps found in the small form factor Evo computers as well. That's pretty much what all the wires mean and how to hot wire it, and pretty much that's it. So I'll make another video once I finally get to implementing my modifications. Who knows when that'll be? It could be a very long time from now, but yeah, so there you go.